Enjoy your stay here and sign the divorce papers, okay? Benjamin's cold voice echoed as he stood in the hospital room, his arm around Anna, his mistress, who flaunted a tight red dress. Tiana, a brilliant black woman who built Novatech from nothing, lay in a hospital bed, battling early-stage cancer and the sting of betrayal. Her husband, whom she trusted, had planned this all along, using her talent to climb, only to discard her when she needed him most. Will Tiana crumble under this heartbreak, or will she rise stronger than ever? Join us in this gripping tale of resilience and redemption. What secrets will unravel, and how will Tiana rewrite her story? Stick around to don't miss a single moment. Subscribe to our channel for the latest updates and share in the comments where you're watching from. Find out. The city hummed with ambition, its skyline a jagged crown of glass and steel. But for Tiana, it was the sound of her heartbeat that drowned out the noise. Born in the shadow of Brooklyn's crumbling tenements, she was a black girl with dreams too big for the cracked sidewalks she walked as a child. Her mother's voice, weathered but warm, echoed in her mind. Tiana, your skin might make the world doubt you, but your mind will make it kneel. Those words were her armor, her fuel, as she carved a path through a world that often tried to dim her light. At 22, armed with a laptop and a relentless will, Tiana founded Novatech, a company built on her vision of technology that could bridge divides, not widen them. It was a seed planted in barren soil, but Tiana was no stranger to making something out of nothing. Enter Benjamin. She met him at a startup conference in Manhattan, where the air buzzed with pitches and promises. He was a white man with a smile that could disarm a room, his voice smooth as polished oak, carrying the kind of confidence that made investors lean in. Tiana, presenting her prototype for a data analytics platform, caught his eye, not just for her brilliance, but for the potential he saw in her. To Tiana, Benjamin was a partner in every sense, charming, ambitious, and seemingly devoted to their shared dream. They spent late nights in a cramped office, mapping out Novatech's future over coffee and code. When he proposed 6 months later under a starlit rooftop, Tiana said yes, believing love was the final piece of her puzzle. She didn't see the calculation in his eyes, the way he measured her like a stock about to soar. Their marriage was a spectacle, the kind that filled Instagram feeds with envy. Tiana in a flowing white gown, her dark skin glowing against the fabric, and Benjamin, tall and dashing in a tailored suit, grinning like he'd won the lottery. To the world, they were a power couple, her quiet genius paired with his bold charisma. Friends toasted to their future, whispering about their perfect balance. But perfection is a fragile illusion, and Tiana, for all her analytical brilliance, missed the cracks forming beneath the surface. She poured herself into Novatech, working 18-hour days, refining algorithms, securing contracts, and building a team that believed in her vision. Benjamin, meanwhile, took the spotlight, pitching to investors, shaking hands and basking in the glow of her success. She didn't mind. She told herself it was teamwork, that his charm was the megaphone for her ideas. Novatech grew faster than Tiana had dared to dream. By their third year of marriage, it was a name whispered in Silicon Valley boardrooms, a company poised to redefine data accessibility for underserved communities. Tiana's algorithms were revolutionary, cutting through bureaucratic red tape to deliver real-time solutions for nonprofits and small businesses. She worked with a fire in her belly, driven by the faces of people like her mother, who deserved better than the world had given them. Benjamin, however, saw dollar signs. He pushed for flashier projects, bigger clients, and a headquarters that screamed prestige. Tiana acquiesced, trusting his instincts, not noticing how his suggestions always tilted toward his glory. She paid for their sleek brownstone in Brooklyn, its walls lined with art they chose together. And when Benjamin's side ventures failed, she quietly covered the losses, believing in his potential as fiercely as she believed in her own. But there were signs, subtle at first, like shadows creeping at dusk. Benjamin started coming home later, his phone buzzing with messages he'd angle away from her. Their conversations, once electric with ideas, grew stilted. He'd brush off her questions with a smile, saying, "Just business, babe. You focus on the tech stuff." Tiana, ever the optimist, chalked it up to stress. She didn't want to believe the man who'd vowed to build an empire with her was drifting. Her grandmother's voice, faint but persistent, whispered warnings. A man who loves you lifts you up, not himself. Tiana pushed the thought away, burying herself in work. She was on the verge of something monumental, a $12 billion deal that would catapult Novatech onto to the global stage. It was her secret, a surprise she planned to unveil to Benjamin when the contracts were signed, a testament to their shared dream. She imagined his face lighting up, the way it did when they first started, when love felt like enough. One morning, as dawn painted the city gold, Tiana sat at their kitchen island, laptop open, reviewing deal documents. Her eyes burned from another sleepless night, but her heart raced with anticipation. Benjamin shuffled in, his hair tousled, phone in hand. Morning, she said, her voice bright despite the exhaustion. He grunted, scrolling through his screen, barely glancing at her. Big day? She asked, pouring him coffee. He shrugged. Just meetings. You? She hesitated, wanting to tell him about the deal, but something in his distracted gaze stopped her. Same old, she lied, smiling. He left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him. Tiana stared at the empty space, a familiar unease curling in her chest. She dismissed it, blaming her nerves, but it lingered like a storm cloud on the horizon. At Novatech's office, Tiana moved through her day like a general commanding a battlefield. Her team respected her, but one person stood out. James, her operations manager. A white man with a quiet strength, he had a knack for anticipating her needs, whether it was a revised budget or a moment of levity during a tense meeting. That afternoon, as she finalized a presentation, James knocked on her door. You look like you haven't slept in a week, he said, half joking, half concerned. Tiana laughed, brushing it off. Sleep's overrated, James. We're almost there. He studied her, his hazel eyes searching. Just take care of yourself, okay? We need you. His words were simple, but they carried a warmth that made Tiana pause. She nodded, promising to rest, but her mind was already back on the deal, on Benjamin, on the life she thought they were building. As night fell, Tiana worked alone in the office, the city's lights twinkling beyond the window. Her phone pinged, a message from her lawyer. Final draft ready. Review tomorrow? She smiled, her fingers trembling with excitement. This was it, the moment she'd worked for, the seed of her empire ready to bloom. But as she packed up to head home, a headache pulsed behind her eyes, sharp and insistent. She ignored it, just as she ignored the growing distance between her and Benjamin. She didn't know that the man she loved was already plotting to uproot everything she'd built, that the seed of betrayal had been planted long before she ever said, I do. The Brooklyn brownstone Tiana and Benjamin called home glowed under the soft light of dawn, its walls holding secrets as tightly as they held memories. Tiana sat at the kitchen island, her laptop screen casting a pale blue hue across her face, her fingers dancing over the keys as she refined the final details of Novatech's $12 billion deal. The numbers were dizzying, impossible almost, but they were real, a testament to her relentless grind. She imagined the moment she'd share the news with Benjamin, his eyes lighting up, his arms pulling her close, their shared dreams soaring to new heights. But the Benjamin who shuffled into the kitchen that morning was a stranger. His phone was glued to his hand, his jaw tight, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond her. Morning, Tiana said, her voice bright with forced cheer. He mumbled a reply, not looking up, and the air between them felt heavy, like a storm gathering on a clear day. Tiana poured coffee, the rich aroma filling the silence. Big plans today? She asked, sliding a mug toward him. Benjamin shrugged, his fingers tapping out a message. Just meetings. You know how it is. His tone was clipped, dismissive, and Tiana felt a pang in her chest. She studied him, the sharp lines of his face, the way his wedding ring caught the light. Lately, he was always distracted, his warmth reserved for boardrooms or strangers, not her. She pushed the thought away, chalking it up to the pressure of his own ventures. Novatech was her baby, but Benjamin had his side projects, flashy startups that burned through cash faster than they generated it. Tiana had bailed him out more times than she cared to count, wiring funds, smoothing over investor doubts, all without a word of thanks. Love, she told herself, didn't need gratitude. It needed trust. But trust was a fragile thing, and Tiana was starting to feel its edges fray. She remembered her grandmother's stories told under the hum of a Harlem street lamp. A man's heart is like a house, child. If the windows are always shut, you'd best start asking why. Tiana shook off the memory, focusing on her laptop. The deal was her lifeline, a secret she guarded even from Benjamin. She wanted it to be perfect, a surprise that would pull them back to the days when they'd stay up all night dreaming of empires. She typed a quick email to her lawyer, confirming a meeting to review the contract, then glanced at Benjamin. "Want me to grab dinner tonight? We could celebrate," she offered, her voice soft with hope. He shook his head, eyes still on his phone. "I'm out late. Don't wait up." He grabbed his coat and left, the door clicking shut like a verdict. Tiana sat alone, the coffee cooling in her hands. The unease that had been simmering for weeks now bubbled closer to the surface. She replayed their morning, searching for clues in his clipped words, his averted gaze. Was it stress or something darker? She pushed the thought down, burying herself in work. Novatech's office was her sanctuary, a sleek space in downtown Brooklyn where her team buzzed with purpose. She moved through meetings with precision, her mind sharp despite the fatigue tugging at her edges. James, her operations manager, caught her eye during a briefing. "You okay, Tiana?" he asked quietly, his hazel eyes searching hers. She smiled, brushing it off. "Just burning the midnight oil, James. You know me." He didn't push, but his concern lingered, a quiet anchor in her storm. That afternoon, Tiana met with her lead engineer, Maya, to review a new algorithm. Maya, a young black woman with a quick laugh and sharper mind, was one of Tiana's proudest hires. "This is game-changing," Maya said, pointing to the code on her screen. "We're going to blow the investors away." Tiana nodded, her heart swelling with pride, but her head throbbed, a dull ache that had started days ago. She ignored it, diving into the numbers, the projections, the future. The $12 billion deal was more than a paycheck. It was a legacy, a way to prove that a girl from the projects could rewrite the rules. She worked late, the office emptying around her, the city's lights twinkling like stars she could almost touch. When Tiana finally got home, the brownstone was dark, Benjamin's absence a tangible weight. She found a note on the counter. "Meeting ran late. Don't worry." Her stomach twisted, but she told herself it was nothing. She poured a glass of wine, sat on the couch, and opened her laptop. An email from her lawyer waited. "Contract's nearly done. One last push." She smiled, the thrill of the deal momentarily drowning out her doubts. But as she scrolled through her phone, a notification caught her eye. A tagged photo on Instagram. Benjamin laughing at a rooftop bar, his arm around a woman in a red dress. The caption read, "New ventures, new vibes." Tiana's breath caught. The woman's face was blurred, but the dress clung to her like a second skin, bold and unmistakable. Tiana's fingers hovered over the screen, her heart pounding. She closed the app, telling herself it was a client, a colleague, anything but what her gut screamed. The next morning, Tiana woke before dawn, her headache sharper now, her body heavy with exhaustion. She stood at the mirror, studying her reflection, her dark skin, her tired eyes, the strength she'd fought so hard to keep. She thought of her mother, who'd worked double shifts to keep food on the table, and her grandmother who'd faced a world that tried to break her. "You're stronger than their doubts," her grandmother had said. Tiana clung to those words as she dressed for the day, choosing a tailored blazer that felt like armor. At the office, James was waiting with coffee and a stack of reports. "You're pushing too hard," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Let me take some of this off your plate." Tiana shook her head. "I've got it, James. This deal, it's everything." He didn't argue, but his eyes held a quiet worry that followed her all day. As evening fell, Tiana sat in her office, the city a glittering backdrop. Her phone buzzed. A text from Benjamin. "Out with investors. Be home late." She stared at the message, her fingers trembling. The cracks in their marriage were widening, and she could no longer pretend they were just stress. She thought of the woman in the red dress, the late nights, the cold mornings. Her grandmother's voice whispered again, "A house with no light is no home." Tiana closed her laptop, her heart heavy but her resolve unbroken. The deal was her lifeline, her proof that she could build something unbreakable. But as she stepped into the night, The ache in her head pulsed sharper, a warning she couldn't ignore. The empire she'd built was strong, but the ground beneath her was starting to shake. The hum of Brooklyn's morning traffic faded as Tiana stood before her team at Novatech's headquarters, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. The conference room buzzed with anticipation, screens glowing with data projections for the $12 billion deal that would redefine their future. Tiana, in a sharp navy suit, commanded the room, her dark eyes fierce with purpose. She was a warrior in her element, weaving numbers and vision into a tapestry that left her team in awe. But the headache that had plagued her for days now clawed at her temples, sharper, more insistent. She ignored it, pushing through slides, her words painting a future where Novatech would empower communities forgotten by the tech giants. Her lead engineer, Maya, nodded enthusiastically, while James, her operations manager, watched with a quiet intensity, his hazel eyes catching the slight tremor in her hands. Mid-sentence, the room tilted. Tiana's vision blurred, the numbers on the screen sliding into a kaleidoscope of light. Her knees buckled, and she gripped the table, her breath shallow. Maya's voice cut through the haze. "Tiana, you okay?" But it was too late. The world spun, and she collapsed. The last thing she heard was James shouting her name as darkness swallowed her whole. When she awoke, the sterile white of a hospital ceiling stared back, cold and unyielding. Machines beeped rhythmically, their steady pulse a stark contrast to the chaos in her chest. Her mother, Rosa, sat beside her face etched with worry, her hands clutching a rosary. "Oh, baby," Rosa whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. "You scared me to death." Tiana tried to speak, but her throat was sandpaper, her body heavy as stone. A doctor entered, his expression grave. "Mrs. Harris, you've been pushing yourself too hard. Severe exhaustion, dehydration, and—" He hesitated, his eyes softening with pity. "We found something else. Early-stage breast cancer. Treatable, but you need to rest and start treatment immediately." The words landed like a sledgehammer, shattering the fragile hope Tiana had clung to. "Cancer," the word echoed, drowning out the beeping monitors. She thought of her grandmother, who'd fought and lost to the same disease, and her mother's trembling hands. Rosa squeezed her fingers, whispering, "You're stronger than this, Tiana. We'll get through it." But Tiana's mind was a battlefield, torn between fear and the deal that still burned in her heart. She nodded, her voice a rasp. "I need my phone. The deal—" James appeared at the door, his face pale but resolute, carrying her laptop bag. "Tiana, you need to focus on you right now," he said, setting the bag down. "The team's got this. I've got this." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed a storm of worry. Tiana managed a weak smile. "Thanks, James. But I can't stop now." He didn't argue, just stayed close, a quiet pillar in the chaos. Hours passed in a blur of tests and IV drips, Tiana's mind racing despite her body's betrayal. She texted her lawyer, confirming she'd review the deal remotely, determined to keep her empire alive even from a hospital bed. Then came Benjamin. The door swung open and he strode in, his tailored suit pristine, his arm around Anna, a white woman in a red dress that clung to her like a taunt, cut high above the knee. Tiana's breath caught, the room shrinking to the space between them. Benjamin's eyes were cold, his smile a blade. "Enjoy your stay here and sign the divorce papers, okay?" he said, tossing a folder onto the bed. Anna smirked, her blonde hair catching the fluorescent light, her presence a calculated insult. "It's over, Tiana," Benjamin continued, his voice dripping with disdain. "Anna's what I need. Beautiful, refined. Let's be honest, your skin, your everything. It was never enough." The words sliced through Tiana, each one a betrayal deeper than the last. Her color, her essence, weaponized against her by the man she'd built a life with. Rosa gasped, her hands trembling with rage, but Tiana raised a hand, silencing her. Her eyes locked onto Benjamin's, dry and unyielding. "You think this breaks me?" she whispered, her voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. Anna laughed, a high, brittle sound, but Benjamin's jaw tightened, as if her defiance unsettled him. He pushed the pen toward her. "Just sign, Tiana. Make it easy." Her fingers shook as she opened the folder, the word divorce glaring up at her. She saw flashes of their life together, the late nights, the shared dreams, the sacrifices she'd made to prop him up. All lies. She signed, her hands steady despite the fire in her chest, each stroke of the pen a severance of the life she'd known. Benjamin and Anna left without another word, their laughter echoing down the hall like a fading echo of her pain. Rosa wept, but Tiana stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. The deal. She clung to it like a lifeline, a reminder that she was more than Benjamin's betrayal. She called her lawyer, her voice hoarse but resolute. "Send the contract, now!" James, still by her side, frowned. "Tiana, you need to rest." But she shook her head. "Rest won't save me. This will." He relented, handing her the laptop, his presence a quiet reassurance. As she opened the contract, the $12 billion figure glowed on the screen, a beacon in the dark. She signed, her signature a vow, not just to Novatech, but to herself. The hospital room was silent except for the drip of the IV and Rosa's soft prayers. Tiana's body ached, her diagnosis a heavy shadow, but something fierce stirred within her. Benjamin thought he'd broken her, that his words about her skin, her worth, would bury her. He was wrong. She thought of her grandmother's voice. A storm doesn't break a tree with strong roots. Tiana's roots ran deep, forged in struggle and resilience. She looked at James, his steady presence a contrast to Benjamin's betrayal. "I'm going to fight," she said, her voice low but ironclad. "Not just the cancer, all of it." The room felt smaller, the walls closing in, but Tiana's spirit was vast, unbroken, ready to rise. The hospital room was a cage of sterile white, its walls closing in on Tiana as the beeping monitors marked time like a metronome of her resolve. The sting of Benjamin's betrayal, his cruel words about her skin, his arm around Anna in that brazen red dress, burned in her chest, but Tiana refused to let it consume her. She lay in the bed, IV line tethered to her arm, her body weakened by early-stage cancer and exhaustion. But her mind was a furnace, forging something unbreakable. The $12 billion deal with Novatech was her lifeline, a beacon in the darkness of her diagnosis and her shattered marriage. She clutched her laptop, its screen glowing with the final contract draft, each clause a testament to her years of sacrifice. Her mother, Rosa, sat nearby, her eyes red but fierce, whispering prayers that mingled with the hum of machines. James, her steadfast operations manager, hovered by the door, his hazel eyes watching her with a mix of worry and admiration. Tiana's fingers trembled as she opened the email from her lawyer, the subject line stark: "Final contract, urgent." The deal was more than a financial triumph. It was her legacy, a way to prove that a black girl from Brooklyn's projects could rewrite the rules of a world that tried to box her in. She'd kept it secret, even from Benjamin, dreaming of the moment she'd surprise him with their shared victory. Now that dream was ash, replaced by a fiercer resolve. To survive, to thrive, to show him she was more than his insults. She typed a reply, her voice echoing in her mind. "Schedule the signing for tomorrow. Video call." Her lawyer hesitated on the phone, his voice soft. "Tiana, you're in no condition." She cut him off, her tone steel. "I'm signing it. Make it happen." The line went quiet, then a reluctant, "All right, tomorrow at noon." James stepped closer, his brow furrowed. "Tiana, you're fighting cancer. You don't have to do this now." She met his gaze, her dark eyes blazing despite the pallor of her face. "This deal is who I am, James. It's what I bled for. He doesn't get to take that from me." Her voice cracked, not with weakness, but with fury. James nodded, his silence a promise to stand by her. He set up her laptop for the call, arranging files with the precision of someone who knew her better than she realized. Rosa squeezed her hand, her voice low. "Your grandmother would be proud, baby. She fought too. You got her fire." Tiana swallowed hard, the weight of her lineage grounding her. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every woman who'd been underestimated, discarded, or betrayed. The next morning, Tiana woke to pain, her body protesting every movement. The cancer treatment plan loomed, but she pushed it to the back of her mind. She had a war to win first. James arrived early, bringing coffee and a fresh stack of documents, his quiet strength a contrast to the chaos of the day before. "You sure about this?" he asked, adjusting the laptop for the video call. Tiana managed a faint smile. "I've never been sure." She adjusted her hospital gown, pulling a silk scarf over her head to hide the thinning patches from stress. The mirror showed a woman battered but unbowed, her dark skin glowing with defiance. She thought of Benjamin's words. Your skin was never enough, and her jaw tightened. She'd show him what enough looked like. At noon, the video call connected, the Novatech board appearing on screen. 8 men in suits, 1 woman with sharp eyes, all waiting for her. Tiana sat up, ignoring the ache in her bones, her voice clear despite the IV drip. "Let's make history," she said, and the board leaned in, captivated. The chairman outlined the deal, a $12 billion acquisition that would make Novatech a global leader in data accessibility. Tiana's algorithms, her vision, were the heart of it. She signed the digital contract, her hands steady, each click a declaration of her worth. The board erupted in applause, the woman on the panel smiling with something like pride. "Congratulations, Mrs. Harris," the chairman said. "You're the majority shareholder now." Tiana nodded, her heart pounding, not with fear but with triumph. She'd done it, not for Benjamin, but for herself. As the call ended, Tiana leaned back, exhaustion washing over her. James was there, his hand brushing hers as he took the laptop. "You're incredible," he said softly. She met his eyes, seeing something deeper than loyalty, a quiet faith that steadied her. "I had to," she whispered. "He thought he could break me." Rosa, watching from the corner, wiped a tear. "He doesn't know you, baby. Never did." Tiana's thoughts turned to the next battle, her health, her future. She called her lawyer again, her voice cold. "Transfer all my assets to my name. Freeze Benjamin's access to everything. Accounts, cards, investments. No exceptions." The lawyer hesitated. "Are you sure? This is—" "Do it," Tiana snapped. "He's not my husband anymore." The hospital room felt smaller, the air thick with the weight of her decisions. Tiana's mind raced, replaying Benjamin's betrayal, Anna's smug laughter, the divorce papers she'd signed. She felt the sting of his words about her skin, her worth, but they no longer cut as deeply. She was rebuilding, brick by brick. She looked at James, who was organizing her files, his presence a quiet reassurance. "Why do you stay?" she asked suddenly, her voice raw. He paused, meeting her gaze. "Because you're worth fighting for, Tiana. Not just Novatech. You." The words landed softly, like a promise she wasn't ready to trust but couldn't ignore. That night, as Rosa slept in the chair and James stepped out to grab food, Tiana stared out the hospital window. Brooklyn's lights twinkled, a reminder of the world she'd built and the one she'd lost. The cancer diagnosis loomed, a shadow she couldn't outrun, but the signed contract was her shield, her proof that she was more than Benjamin's lies. She thought of her grandmother's voice. "When the world tries to bury you, plant yourself deeper." Tiana closed her eyes, her resolve hardening. She'd fight the cancer, the pain, the betrayal. She'd fight for the empire she'd built and the woman she was becoming. The cracks Benjamin had left were real, but so was her will, and it was stronger than he'd ever known. The hospital room was a battlefield, its sterile walls bearing witness to Tiana's quiet war against her body and her broken heart. The IV dripped steadily, a metronome to her resolve, while the weight of her early-stage cancer diagnosis pressed against her like a storm cloud. Benjamin's betrayal, his cruel words, the red dress of his mistress Anna, the divorce papers, lingered like a bruise. But Tiana was no stranger to pain. She'd signed the $12 billion deal for Novatech from her hospital bed, a defiant act that anchored her to her purpose. Now, as she faced weeks of treatment, her spirit burned brighter than the fluorescent lights above. Her mother, Rosa, sat by her side, her hands calloused from years of labor, weaving stories of their ancestors' resilience. James, her operations manager, moved in and out of the room like a shadow, his presence a steady pulse in the chaos of her world. Tiana's days blurred into a rhythm of tests, infusions, and exhaustion. The cancer caught early was treatable, But the chemotherapy left her weak, her dark skin ashen, her once vibrant curls thinning under the hospital's harsh lights. Yet her mind remained sharp, tethered to Novatech and the empire she refused to let crumble. James took on the daily operations, managing her team with a quiet efficiency that kept the company humming. He brought reports to her bedside, his voice calm as he outlined progress on the deal's integration. "We closed the first phase," he said one afternoon, setting a folder on her tray. "Maya's team is ahead of schedule." Tiana nodded, her eyes scanning the numbers, a faint smile breaking through her fatigue. "You're keeping my dream alive, James," she whispered. He shrugged, his hazel eyes warm. "It's your dream, Tiana. I'm just the guy holding the fort." Rosa, ever watchful, saw more than Tiana did. "That boy's got a heart for you," she said one evening, her voice low as she braided Tiana's scarf into place. Tiana shook her head, dismissing it. "He's just loyal, Mama. He's doing his job." But Rosa's eyes, wise with years of seeing through facades, held a knowing glint. "Loyalty like that ain't just a job, baby." Tiana didn't respond, her thoughts tangled in the wreckage of Benjamin's betrayal. She couldn't afford to trust again, not yet. Still, James's presence was a balm, his quiet humor, his knack for knowing when to push and when to let her be. One night, when nausea kept her awake, he read to her from a dog-eared copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God, his voice steady, pulling her out of the pain. "You remind me of Janie," he said, closing the book. "Stronger than the storms." Tiana's heart ached at his words, not just for the kindness, but for the reminder of who she was. She thought of her grandmother, whose stories of black women who'd faced down slavery, segregation, and heartbreak echoed in her blood. "My grandma used to say, 'A woman's strength is her roots,'" Tiana said, her voice hoarse. "I'm trying to remember that." James leaned forward, his eyes locking with hers. "Your roots are deeper than you know, Tiana. You're not just surviving. You're building something eternal." The words landed like a spark, igniting a fire she thought Benjamin had snuffed out. She looked away, afraid of the warmth in his gaze, afraid of what it might mean to let someone in again. The hospital became her world, its rhythms both oppressive and grounding. Rosa brought homemade stew, ignoring the nurses' protests, and told stories of their family's women. How her great-aunt fought off landlords with nothing but a broom and a will of iron, how her mother sang gospel to drown out despair. "You come from fighters," Rosa said, her voice fierce. "This cancer, this man, they ain't bigger than you." Tiana clung to those words, letting them anchor her when the pain or the memories threatened to pull her under. She spent hours on her laptop, reviewing Novatech's plans, emailing her team, ensuring the deal's momentum didn't falter. James filtered her inbox, shielding her from the gossip swirling online. Headlines about her collapse, whispers of her divorce. One evening, as the city's lights glittered beyond the window, Tiana found a photo on her phone, sent anonymously. Benjamin and Anna at a rooftop bar, her red dress a taunt, his smile smug. The caption read, "Moving on to better things." Tiana's chest tightened, but she didn't cry. She deleted the photo, her jaw set. "He doesn't get to define me," she told Rosa, who nodded fiercely. "Never did, baby." James, overhearing, added quietly, "You're defining yourself every day, Tiana. Don't forget that." His words were a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge of despair. She looked at him, seeing not just her manager, but a man who saw her, really saw her, beyond the empire, beyond the pain. As weeks turned into months, Tiana's body began to respond to treatment, her strength returning in small, stubborn increments. She started walking the hospital halls, James at her side, his arm ready to catch her if she faltered. One night, when the ward was quiet, she asked him, "Why do you stay, James? You could be running your own show somewhere else." He paused, his expression soft but resolute. "Because you're not just my boss, Tiana. You're you, and I believe in you." The words hung in the air, raw and unguarded. Tiana's heart stuttered, but she pushed it down, afraid of the vulnerability it stirred. Instead, she nodded, whispering, "Thank you." It was enough for now. By the end of the third month, Tiana's doctor brought cautious hope. The cancer was responding well, but rest was non-negotiable. She agreed, but her mind was already turning to the future. She called her lawyer, her voice steady. Make sure Benjamin's name is off everything. I want Novatech clean. The lawyer confirmed the assets were secure. Benjamin's access severed. Tiana leaned back, the hospital bed creaking under her. She thought of Benjamin's cold laughter, Anna's smirk, and the divorce papers she'd signed. They thought they'd broken her, but they'd only cleared the ground for her to rebuild. With Rosa's prayers, James's quiet support, and her own unyielding will, Tiana was ready to fight, not just for her life, but for the legacy she'd carved from the ashes of betrayal. 6 months had passed since Tiana's world shattered in that hospital room, where Benjamin's betrayal and her cancer diagnosis collided like a storm. Now, as Brooklyn's skyline glittered under a velvet night, Tiana stood at the threshold of her rebirth. The grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel shimmered with crystal chandeliers, and the hum of the city's elite gathered for Novatech's first charity gala. Tiana, discharged from the hospital just weeks ago, wore an emerald gown that hugged her frame, its deep green catching the light like a forest after rain. Her hair, regrowing after chemo, was swept into an elegant updo, and her dark skin glowed with a defiance that silenced whispers. She was no longer the woman who'd collapsed under the weight of betrayal. She was a phoenix, rising from ashes, ready to reclaim her place. The gala was her brainchild, a fundraiser for healing hearts, a foundation to support women betrayed in marriage, a cause carved from her own scars. Tiana had planned every detail, the gold-embossed invitations, the string quartet, the keynote that would unveil her vision. The room buzzed with anticipation, cameras flashing as reporters jostled for a glimpse of the woman whose story had captivated the city. Her mother, Rosa, stood proudly in the crowd, her eyes gleaming with pride, while James, ever her shadow, lingered nearby, his tailored suit unable to hide the quiet strength in his gaze. "You ready for this?" he asked, handing her a glass of sparkling water. Tiana's lips curved, a spark of her old fire returning. "I was born ready, James." As she stepped into the ballroom, the crowd parted, their murmurs a mix of awe and curiosity. Tiana's journey, her collapse, her divorce, her battle with cancer, had gone viral, fueled by tabloid headlines and social media whispers. Some saw her as a victim, others a warrior, but tonight she'd define herself. She mingled with ease, shaking hands with tech moguls, politicians, and artists, her smile warm, but her eyes sharp. A young black entrepreneur approached, her voice trembling. "You're why I keep going," she said, clutching Tiana's hand. Tiana squeezed back, her heart swelling. "You're why I'm here," she replied, and the woman's eyes shone with tears. The night reached its crescendo as Tiana took the stage, the room falling silent. Her voice, clear and resonant, cut through the air like a blade. "6 months ago, I thought my story was over," she began, her gaze sweeping the crowd. "I was betrayed by the person I trusted most, told I wasn't enough because of who I am. I faced cancer, doubt, in a world that wanted me to shrink. But I learned something. Strength isn't in avoiding heartbreak, it's in what you build from it." The audience leaned in, captivated, as she unveiled Healing Hearts. This foundation is for every woman who's been left behind, who's been told she's less than. It's a promise that your story doesn't end with pain. It begins there. Applause thundered, some guests wiping tears, others standing, their cheers a tide lifting her higher. Then the doors swung open and a hush fell. Benjamin and Anna entered, their presence a jarring note in the symphony of the night. Benjamin's suit was crisp, but his face strained, while Anna, in a silver dress as bold as her red one months ago, clung to his arm, her smile forced. The crowd's eyes flicked between them and Tiana, the air thick with unspoken scandal. Whispers rippled. Benjamin's business was crumbling, Anna's rumored affairs a public disgrace. They moved through the room like ghosts, ignored by the elite who once courted them. Tiana's gaze met Benjamin's across the ballroom, and for a moment, time froze. She saw the man she'd loved, the one who'd used her, insulted her, and discarded her. But the ache was gone, replaced by a calm certainty. She felt nothing, not anger, not pity, just the freedom of letting go. Tiana continued her speech, her voice unwavering. Healing hearts isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving, about turning loss into legacy. She announced the foundation's first initiative, a network of shelters and job programs for women rebuilding after betrayal. The crowd erupted again, pledges pouring in, millions raised in minutes. Reporters scrambled for quotes, but Tiana slipped off the stage, her poise unshaken. James was there, his hand brushing hers. "You were incredible," he said, his voice low with pride. Tiana smiled, a real one this time. "We're just getting started." As the evening waned, Benjamin and Anna lingered at the edges, their presence a fading echo. A reporter cornered them, asking about Tiana's speech, but Benjamin muttered something vague and pulled Anna away. Tiana watched from a distance, her heart steady. She thought of her grandmother's words. "A snake sheds its skin, but it's still a snake." Benjamin and Anna could have their illusions. She had her truth. Rosa joined her, her voice fierce. "You showed 'em, baby. All of 'em." Tiana hugged her, the weight of her mother's pride grounding her. James lingered nearby, his quiet support a constant she was beginning to cherish. The gala ended in a blaze of triumph, the ballroom emptying as guests buzzed with Tiana's words. Outside, paparazzi swarmed, but Tiana moved through them, her head high, James and Rosa flanking her like guardians. Headlines would soon scream of her victory, of Benjamin's fall, of Anna's disgrace. But Tiana didn't care for the noise. She'd built something real tonight, not just a foundation, but a declaration of her worth. As she stepped into the night, Brooklyn's lights stretching before her, she felt the stir of something new. Not just survival, but power. The gala was her return, a signal to the world and to herself that Tiana Harris was unbreakable. Her empire forged not just in code, but in courage. The city's pulse thrummed outside the Meridian Hotel as Tiana's gala faded into the night, its echoes of triumph reverberating through Brooklyn's streets. Tiana had risen, her emerald gown and unyielding spirit casting a light that dimmed the shadows of her past. But across town, in a gaudy penthouse perched above the city's glitter, Benjamin Harris was unraveling. The man who'd once charmed boardrooms with a smile now paced a marble floor, his phone buzzing with unanswered calls from creditors. Anna, his mistress, lounged on a velvet sofa, her silver dress from the gala discarded for a silk robe, her eyes flicking between Instagram and Benjamin's growing agitation. The world they'd built on lies was crumbling, and the cracks were too wide to ignore. Benjamin's empire, if it could ever have been called that, was a house of cards propped up by Tiana's silent labor. His startups, flashy ventures in crypto and real estate, had always leaned on her networks, her money, her vision. Without her, they were hollow, and the world was starting to notice. Investors, once dazzled by his charisma, now saw a man scrambling to cover bad bets. A week after the gala, a damning headline broke: Harris Ventures faces insolvency amid fraud allegations. The article detailed unpaid debts, shady deals, and whispers of Benjamin's gambling addiction, a vice he'd hidden even from Anna. Social media erupted, old friends distanced themselves, and suppliers cut ties. Benjamin's phone, once a lifeline to power, became a harbinger of doom, each notification a nail in his coffin. Anna, meanwhile, was no savior. Her own scandal, a publicized affair with a rival investor, had splashed across tabloids, painting her as the opportunist who'd traded one sinking ship for another. At the gala, her presence with Benjamin had been a desperate bid for relevance, but the crowd's cold indifference had stung. Now she scrolled through Tiana's glowing headlines, each one a dagger. Tiana Harris launches Healing Hearts, redefines resilience. Anna's lips curled in envy. "She's just lucky," she muttered, tossing her phone aside. Benjamin snapped, his voice raw. "Lucky? She's a genius, Anna. I was the lucky one, and I threw it away." The admission hung between them, a rare crack in his facade. But Anna scoffed. "Don't get soft now. We'll figure this out." Their penthouse, once a symbol of their brazen new life, felt colder by the day. Bills piled up, the rent was overdue, and the fridge was stocked with more wine than food. Benjamin's days were a blur of frantic calls, pleading with investors who no longer trusted him. One evening, as rain lashed the windows, he received an email that stopped him cold. His main investor, a hedge fund tycoon, was pulling out, citing unstable leadership. Benjamin's hands shook as he dialed the man's number, only to get voicemail. He tried 3 more contacts, same result. The money was gone, and with it, his last shred of credibility. Anna watched him pace, her patience fraying. "What's wrong now?" she demanded. Benjamin turned on her, his face haggard. "Everything's falling apart, Anna. Happy now?" Her eyes narrowed. "Don't blame me. You wanted this life." The fight that followed was a storm of venom. Anna accused him of dragging her into his mess, while Benjamin shouted that she'd pushed him to leave Tiana. "You said we'd be unstoppable," he roared, slamming his fist on the counter. Anna laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "Unstoppable? You're a fraud, Benjamin. Without Tiana, you're nothing." The words cut deeper than he'd expected, echoing the truth he'd avoided for months. He stormed out, the door slamming behind him, leaving Anna alone with her resentment. She scrolled through Instagram again. Tiana's radiant gala photos, a stark contrast to her own fading star. For the first time, doubt crept in. Had she bet on the wrong man? Desperate, Benjamin sought out Tiana. He found her at a quiet hotel where she'd retreated after her hospital discharge, her new sanctuary away from the brownstone's ghosts. He stood at her door disheveled, his charm replaced by desperation. "Tiana, please," he began, his voice breaking. "I messed up. I need your help." Tiana, in a simple sweater, her eyes steady despite the chemo's toll, stood tall. "Help?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with steel. "You insulted me, betrayed me, threw me away. Why are you here?" Benjamin's shoulders slumped and the truth spilled out like poison. "I'm broke. The company's done. I got into gambling, drugs. I thought I could win it back, but it's all gone." "I'm sorry, Tiana. I was wrong." Tiana studied him, the man she'd once loved, now a shadow of himself. His confession, gambling, drugs, the lies, didn't surprise her. It only confirmed what she'd begun to suspect. She thought of the nights she'd covered his debts, the dreams she'd poured into him, the insults he'd hurled about her skin, her worth. Her grandmother's voice echoed, "A man who breaks you, you don't get to beg for your pieces." She straightened, her gaze unyielding. "You made your choices, Benjamin. I built you up once, and you repaid me with betrayal. I won't save you from yourself." Tears welled in his eyes, but Tiana was unmoved. "Go," she said, her voice final. He hesitated, then turned, disappearing into the rain-soaked night. Back at the penthouse, Anna was packing. "I'm done, Benjamin," she said when he returned, her bags by the door. "You're a sinking ship, and I'm not drowning with you." She left, her heels clicking down the hall, leaving Benjamin alone in the wreckage of his ambition. The city that once bowed to his charm now turned its back, his name a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. Tiana's star, meanwhile, soared. Her gala had raised millions, her foundation a beacon for women like her. Benjamin's fall was complete, a man undone by his own greed, while Tiana stood taller, her roots deeper, her future brighter than he could ever have imagined. The Brooklyn skyline shimmered under a crescent moon, its lights a constellation of dreams reborn. Tiana Harris stood at the window of her new apartment, a modest but elegant space she'd claimed after leaving the ghosts of her old brownstone behind. The scars of her past, Benjamin's betrayal, the sting of his words about her skin, her battle with early-stage cancer, were still there, but they no longer defined her. She'd emerged from the hospital, her $12 billion Novatech deal secured, her foundation, healing hearts a beacon for women shattered by infidelity. Tiana was no longer the woman who'd signed divorce papers under fluorescent lights. She was a force, her dark eyes alight with purpose, her spirit forged in fire. Tonight, as she looked out over the city she'd conquered, she felt the stir of something new. Not just survival, but a life reclaimed. Novatech's headquarters buzzed with a renewed energy, its glass walls reflecting Tiana's vision for a future that empowered the overlooked. She'd returned to work weeks after her discharge, her body still fragile from chemo, but her mind razor sharp. She restructured teams, promoted women like Maya, her lead engineer, and launched initiatives to bring tech education to underserved communities. The press couldn't get enough of her. Magazines clamored for interviews. Talk shows begged for her story. Tiana chose her platforms carefully, avoiding tabloids, speaking only to those who respected her truth. "This isn't about revenge," she told a journalist at a women's summit, her voice steady. "It's about rising, about knowing your worth when others try to steal it." The audience roared, her words a spark igniting hope in hearts across the globe. James, her operations manager, was her constant. Through her hospital days, he'd been her anchor, managing Novatech, bringing her coffee, reading to her when pain kept her awake. Now as she rebuilt her empire, he was more than a colleague. His quiet strength, his hazel eyes that saw her beyond her titles, had become a light in her darkness. Tiana noticed the way he lingered after meetings, the way his laugh eased her tension, the way he never pushed but always stayed. One evening, as they worked late in her office, the city's lights painting patterns on the walls, Tiana caught him watching her. "What?" she asked, a smile tugging at her lips. James shrugged, his voice soft. "Just, you're incredible, Tiana. You make the impossible look easy." Her heart fluttered, a sensation she hadn't allowed herself to feel since Benjamin's betrayal. The world noticed her glow. At industry galas, Tiana moved with a grace that silenced doubters. Young women flooded her inbox with messages. "How do you keep going?" "You're my hero." She answered each one, her words a lifeline to those navigating their own storms. But the weight of her past lingered. She'd cut Benjamin out of her life, his accounts frozen, his name erased from Novatech's legacy. But his shadow haunted her quieter moments. She thought of her grandmother's words. "When a snake sheds its skin, it grows stronger." Tiana was shedding, but the new skin felt tender, untested. James seemed to sense it. One afternoon, as they reviewed a community project, he handed her a sketch of a tech lab for kids, his handwriting neat in the margins. "This is your heart, Tiana," he said, "not just your brain." She looked at him, seeing not just loyalty, but something deeper, something she was afraid to name. That fear cracked one night in her apartment's garden, a small oasis of green she'd cultivated to heal. James had come by with files, but the evening stretched into wine and stories under a starlit sky. The air was warm, the scent of jasmine heavy, and Tiana felt a lightness she hadn't known in years. "Why do you stay, James?" she asked, her voice raw, echoing the question she'd posed in the hospital. He set his glass down, his gaze unwavering. "Because you're not just a boss or a story, Tiana. You're you. I don't promise the world, but I promise I'll be here, always." The words hung between them, a vow as real as any ring. Tiana's breath caught, her heart teetering on the edge of trust. She thought of Benjamin's lies, Anna's smirk, but James was different, his presence a steady tide, not a storm. She leaned closer, her hand brushing his. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I've lost too much to believe in promises." James nodded, his fingers curling around hers. "Then let me show you day by day." The moment was electric, a spark that didn't demand but invited. Tiana smiled, her first real smile in months, and let herself feel the possibility of love, not the reckless kind she'd known with Benjamin, but something rooted, real. They sat in silence, the stars above witnesses to a beginning neither had planned, but both welcomed. Months later, Tiana stood before a mirror, her hair now a soft crown of curls, her body stronger from treatment. She was preparing for a tech conference, her keynote a call to action for inclusive innovation. James waited downstairs, his suit crisp, his smile a quiet promise. "Ready to change the world again?" he asked, offering his arm. Tiana laughed, taking it. "Always." Their partnership, professional and personal, was blossoming, a slow burn that felt like home. The world saw Tiana as a titan, her foundation thriving, her company soaring. But to James, she was simply Tiana, the woman who'd fought and won. As they stepped into the night, Brooklyn's lights stretching before them, Tiana knew she wasn't just reborn. She was in love, and this time, it was real. Brooklyn's dawn painted the sky in hues of gold and rose, a canvas of hope that mirrored the fire in Tiana Harris's heart. A year had passed since her world had fractured, since Benjamin's betrayal in that hospital room, since the cancer diagnosis that threatened to dim her light, since she signed the $12 billion deal that cemented Novatech's place in history. Now standing on the balcony of her new apartment, Tiana was no longer the woman who'd crumbled under betrayal's weight. She was a titan, her dark skin radiant, her curls a soft crown, her eyes alight with a vision that stretched beyond the skyline. The scars of her past were there, but they were stitches in a tapestry of triumph, woven with resilience, love, and a legacy that would outlive her. Tonight, she would step into a new chapter, one that carried the weight of her ancestors and the dreams of those she'd inspired. Novatech had become a global force, its algorithms powering solutions for communities long ignored by tech giants. Tiana's Healing Hearts Foundation had grown into a lifeline, funding shelters, job training, and therapy for women betrayed by love. Her inbox overflowed with letters, young girls in the Bronx dreaming of coding, single mothers rebuilding after heartbreak, Black women who saw her as proof that their skin was no barrier to greatness. Tiana answered each one, her words a bridge between her pain and their hope. The press hailed her as a symbol, but Tiana saw herself as a vessel, carrying forward the strength of her grandmother, her mother Rosa, and every woman who'd fought before her. "Your roots run deep," Rosa had said, and Tiana felt them now, anchoring her to a purpose larger than herself. James had become her rock, his quiet devotion a contrast to Benjamin's flash and deceit. Their love, born in the hospital's shadows, had grown in the light of shared dreams. He'd proposed months ago in her apartment's garden, under the same jasmine-scented stars where they'd first dared to trust. No grand gestures, just a simple ring and a promise. "I'll walk beside you, Tiana, wherever this life takes us." She'd said yes, her heart steady, knowing this love was built on truth. Their wedding was days away, a small ceremony planned in a Brooklyn park, with Rosa, Maya, and a handful of loved ones. Tiana wanted intimacy, not spectacle, a celebration of love, not a performance for the world. Tonight, Tiana stood at the podium of an international tech conference, the grand hall packed with industry leaders, activists, and dreamers. Her emerald dress shimmered, a nod to the gala that marked her return, but her presence was the true light. She spoke with a clarity that silenced the room, her voice weaving a story of resilience. "A year ago, I was told I wasn't enough, by a man I loved, by a world that tried to define me by my skin, my pain, my illness," she began, her eyes sweeping the crowd. "But I learned that worth isn't given, it's claimed. It's in the code you write, the hands you lift, the dreams you refuse to let die." She unveiled Novatech's latest initiative, a global network of tech labs for marginalized youth, each named after a woman who'd shaped her grandmother Rosa, Maya. The audience rose, their applause a thunder that shook the hall. As Tiana stepped off the stage, a young girl approached, her braids tight, her eyes wide with awe. "I want to be like you," she whispered, clutching a notebook filled with code. Tiana knelt, her heart swelling. "You already are," she said, signing the notebook. "Keep building." The moment was a mirror of her own childhood, when dreams felt impossible, but her mother's voice made them real. Backstage, James waited, his smile a quiet anchor. "You changed her life tonight," he said, his hand finding hers. Tiana leaned into him, the weight of the moment grounding her. "She's changing mine," she replied, her voice soft but fierce. Benjamin and Anna were ghosts now, their names faded from the city's pulse. Benjamin's ventures had collapsed under the weight of his debts and addictions, his charm no match for the truth. Anna, exposed by her scandals, had fled to obscurity, her social media silent. Tiana heard whispers of their fall, creditors circling, friends turning away, but she felt no vindication, only a quiet release. Her grandmother's voice echoed, "Let the snakes slither away. Your garden's too rich for them." Tiana's garden was thriving, blooming with purpose and love. She'd let go of revenge, choosing instead to build a legacy that would outshine their shadows. The wedding day arrived, a crisp morning in a Brooklyn park where cherry blossoms danced in the breeze. Tiana wore a simple ivory dress, her curls loose, her smile unguarded. Rosa walked her down the aisle, her eyes wet with pride, while Maya and the Novatech team cheered from the small crowd. James stood waiting, his suit understated, his gaze locked on her like she was the only star in his sky. Their vows were brief but raw, Tiana promising to trust, James vowing to stand by her through every storm. As they kissed, the crowd erupted, petals falling like a blessing. Rosa whispered, "Your grandma's smiling, baby," and Tiana felt it, a warmth that transcended time. In the months that followed, Tiana's legacy grew. Healing Hearts expanded, opening centers across the country, each a haven for women reclaiming their lives. Novatech's labs trained thousands, their graduates coding futures that Tiana had once dreamed of in the projects. She and James worked side by side, their partnership a blend of love and purpose. At a quiet dinner, as they toasted to their first year, Tiana looked at him, her heart full. "I thought I'd lost everything," she said, "but I've found more than I knew to dream." James raised his glass, his eyes soft. "You're the dream, Tiana. Always were." As she stood on her balcony that night, Brooklyn's lights stretching before her, Tiana felt the weight of her journey, not just the pain, but the power it had birthed. She was a daughter of fighters, a builder of empires, a woman who'd turned heartbreak into hope. Her legacy wasn't just Novatech or Healing Hearts. It was the fire she lit in others, the proof that no betrayal, no illness, no doubt could dim her light. She whispered to the stars, "I'm here, Grandma, and I'm shining." The city answered with its endless hum, a song of a woman who'd become eternal. Thank you for joining us on Tiana's incredible journey of resilience, betrayal, and triumph. Her story is a testament to the power of rising above pain and building a legacy that inspires. What moved you most about Tiana's transformation? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that spark hope and courage. Until next time, keep shining and we'll see you soon.